Hey there, it's Chris. And if you're here for my usual content, well, we got a little special presentation going on today. Usual stuff's going to start again tomorrow. We got a little special presentation because over the weekend I finally went and did the Killington Ultra. Or at least I attempted to. Unfortunately, I have no little hardware to bring out in front. I only made it one lap. I'm going to go into that real quick in a moment. But before we get into the whole nitty gritty stuff, I want to first have a little bit of fun with numbers just to start this thing out. So, for those of you who've never heard of this course, never seen this course, this is the hardest course Spartan offers. It is an ultramarathon distance course, which is roughly 31 miles, and it takes place on the ski slopes in Killington in Vermont. And for the one loop that I did, which was the Beast Loop plus the Ultra Loop, what that wound up with on when I uploaded my stuff to Strava was roughly 8,400 feet of elevation gain and a distance of roughly 17 and a half miles. So what that translates into is roughly 480 feet of incline and decline per mile. Now, I do residential home remodeling and construction stuff. So to put this in terms that at least are easy for me to deal with, maybe it makes more sense for you, is the average residence has a 8-foot ceiling plus ceiling joist, so it's 9 feet from one floor to the next. You go up and down a flight of stairs, you're going up 9 feet. So if you want the take-home version of this course, divide the 480 feet by 9, that is talking 53 times up and down a flight of stairs per mile, every mile, for the 17 and a half that I did, or it would be for the 31 miles of the full event. Now, at the pace I was going, at the point at which I stopped, for the first 11 miles, I was averaging a 22 minute per mile. By the end, it wound up dropping to a 24. So that translates roughly into 2 times up and down a flight of stairs per minute, every minute, for a little over 7 hours. Or if you want to make the minimum checkpoint cutoff times to complete the race, you would be doing that for pretty much the entire time. You're talking 14 to 15 hours, be 2 times up and down a flight of stairs every single minute for that stretch of time. So when we're talking about this course, that is what we're talking about. Oh, and by the way, there are also going to be 64 obstacles throwing in. So just whether it be doing the monkey bar, sandbag carry, barbed wire crawl, stuff like that, yeah, we're going to throw those things in there too. But in all reality, when anybody thinks of this course, talks about this course, does anything with it, for the most part, if you're doing the sprint, yes, the obstacles mean something. If you're doing the beast or the ultra, the obstacles are really there just to kind of give you a heads up on where you are in the course. You probably looked up the map beforehand. It's like, all right, I got to like the sandbag carry. That means I know I'm here on the course. It's not that it's going to kill you doing the things. It's like, okay, this is like a checkpoint. Here's where I am. At this point in the game, the obstacles are a little more trivial. I hate sounding elitist that way or whatever, but if you're going in here to try like the beast or the ultra, you're not going to remember this course for the obstacles. You're going to remember this thing for the hills and the climbs, the ascents and descents. So as for me, why I only finished the one loop and not the full is I had time to spare. I started at 6:15. The cutoff time at the transition was 2:30. I got there around 1:40-ish, 1:30, 1:40, so I had plenty of time to go through. But unfortunately, what I didn't foresee happening in this race was the inclines were surprisingly not as bad as I was expecting to be. I treated this different than the Vernon and Palmerton that I usually do. I'm huge on racing up those things and trying to get really good times. This one I knew was going to be more of a slog, so I was just trying to keep a 25-minute mile pace and kind of going from there. I went up a little faster. So I was kind of hiking a little more correctly. I was going more true to form, so my legs weren't really killing me on most of the climbs. We'll get into that. But what was getting me was the declines. I didn't understand how hard that was going to be on the joints. So by the end, my ankles were getting sore. I'm trying to go down straight, I'm trying to go down sideways, go down the other side, I'm trying to do whatever I can. My ankles were getting sore. and my left knee started feeling some strange things that I really didn't want to get into. And being as I'm in a profession that historically isn't particularly good on your joints over the years, once I start feeling joint things, it's bail. You hate doing it, but it's just a big bail. This is an extracurricular activity. I'm not going to cause long-term problems for myself to try to deal with a short-term gain. So I very likely would have made the next checkpoint, probably the one after that. Once we got past there, the time frame may have been catching up, but by and large, the declines being as hard as they were on the joints was, I thought, going to be more trouble than what was worth, than what I was going to gain from going further in this. So that was the reason why I bailed on this one mostly, was just, yeah. But otherwise, let's go and pull up our good old friend the map here. And I know we lose the webcam during this, but let's go and just kind of highlight some of the areas on here that I think are worth kind of talking about. Now, on each of the laps, or on, if you're doing, say, the Beast Loop, in my mind, there are 4 main kind of climb areas, and I'm going to highlight that as being the first climb. It was technically 2. It's also easier to circle the Beast one than on the Ultra map because everything kind of blends together if I try to circle these. So you generally had the first climb was like that 3-mile kind of, it's more of like almost the bunny hill of this course. There were a couple little steep sections, but by and large, it was a very kind of user-friendly kind of area. The descents weren't killing you. By and large, the most of the ascents, except for maybe the last like half mile or so, it was a good warm-up area. They threw all of like their obstacles. They had the whole obstacle section kind of in here, the dunk wall, and kind of more the lighter, the easier things. Which, the dunk wall was one of those, again, they have those inflatable mats that go across, that are like those inflatable things that kind of sit on top of the water, that they kind of carve out for. Except the inflatable mat that they used, inflatable wall they put up, was wider than the trench they dug out. So the mat is flush against the water on one side. It was like up a foot off the ground, or up a foot like above the water on the other. So it was like 40 something in the morning at that point. It was a little chilly. It was still a little cooler. It was starting to warm up by the time I got there. But yeah, if I had a choice, I wear glasses. I went under the part where the wall wasn't hitting the water, because glasses and water are not a good combination. I'll throw that out. So we did that, came down, got to like the first descent area. So now we're talking probably somewhere, it was somewhere in here-ish, where we had kind of the real first wake-up call of the day, where we're heading down. It was one of those kind of steeper portions of the hill, and I know this happens on every course. I've heard stories, but on the side of, I'm making hand gestures like it works, but on the side of the course, on the right-hand side there was a woman, I guess, who had fallen, did something, and she was screaming out in pain, frustration, sadness. It was like every emotion coming out at once. I guess she either had twisted the ankle really badly, broken her ankle, or something on the side. There was a medical personnel there who looks like had just gotten there, was kind of treating, or at least it was a staff member treating, waiting for official medical personnel. But that was definitely, I think, the first wake-up call on the course that, yeah, you need to take these descents. Everyone talks about going up the hills. You need to take the downhills super seriously, because you can get yourself into big trouble on this course on any of those things. So made it past that way, again, coming down some of the steep descents. And then we get into this guy here, which is basically the climb everyone talks about on the course, which is up here. It follows the gondola that goes up the mountain. Literally, it is the gondola path that goes up, and that is the Death March, which, frankly, it didn't really live up to the expectation that I thought. That's not the hardest. I'll be honest, I've done Palmerton. I think Palmerton's second hill, in my mind, is harder than by the numbers, the Death March should be harder. But I think Palmerton's second hill still beats that. And frankly, it's not even the hardest hill on this course. It's steep. What you can do is you can see from the bottom straight to the top. But it's very kind of user friendly going up. In that, say, if you have the Palmerton second climb, you're in the woods, so you're always kind of going up either rocks or roots, and they may be like a foot above you. You might have to step up a foot. You might have to step up a foot. You're doing these big steps because there's no place to put it. Here, you're essentially going up a ski slope, so you can actually do the nice, neat, like the shorter kind of steps, like the more textbook, take smaller strides, lean forward, do everything kind of more textbook correctly. And because of that, because you could actually pace yourself nicely on this, I actually don't think the death climb was nearly as bad as the reputation made it sound. That said, this first section over here, yes, the whole thing winds up being about 1.3, 1.4 miles, and it goes up, I think, 1,400 feet worth of elevation gain in the end. So yes, you are gaining that 1,000 feet per mile. But this starting point almost felt kind of like the first hill. It was like a nice little introduction. It wasn't really hard on the legs. And then finally, when you got to this portion, it did pick up quite a bit. But everyone keeps saying, yeah, it's that 1.3, 1.4 mile, however it is. But really, it was only the last zero point 0.8 miles of it, which was the problem. So it was shorter than thought it was going to be. And it allowed you to take the proper strides, which were nice. The downhill was also not too bad. I'm still circling stuff. This downhill here was also kind of very user-friendly. It wasn't super steep. You can kind of jog it, you can kind of walk it, depending how you felt. It was very kind of, at this point, I'm still feeling really, really good in the race. Then we get up to this climb and things start to change. Now, this is when we come out to around this area and you realize you come around the bend and you look down and you're like, oh, there's the top of another ski lift right here. I'm like half mile away or whatever. You're looking down on top of the ski lift. It's like, oh, that puts things in perspective. We're high up on this mountain. We just came down like hundreds of feet, and we are still way above that peak. And that's the peak that overlooks like the whole transition fun area on the bottom. That was steep. That said, we don't actually do that first hill we come up. Instead, we come and do this monster third climb of the day. And this one I thought was actually slightly worse than the death climb, in that the death climb you can see from top to bottom. This one here, again, it's early in the day, so nothing had been trampled yet. Again, the other one you're going up the ski slope is all flat. It's all, if you have the grass, it's like short grasses. These are like the tall grasses. You have things that are like 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot tall kind of grass stuff. And at the point I'd gone through, I was maybe number 200 on the list of people who had gone through at that point. I think there were around 400 people who started the day, a little over. So I was probably in the middle-ish of that group. So at that point in time, no paths had been made whatsoever. So we're going through these super tall grasses, and you have like maybe a foot channel that people are going through, and you're just praying that people in front of you knew where they were going, because I saw no markers. I had no idea where things were. You're just kind of zigzagging up this hill. You can't see what's coming next. You might have a steep portion, and you think it's going to level off. Then instead it gets like steeper again. You come around another turn. You're like, all right, does it keep going? No, it levels out a little bit, and it gets steeper again. You can never tell what was coming next. You had no idea where the top was. And I think mentally that was actually slightly more taxing than the death climb. So for me, that was actually a little more difficult going up. But at the same time, it's still not bad. It's still relatively flat terrain. You can still do the correct kind of walking up and down the hill. You can still follow the textbook, take shorter strides, lean forward, do the correct thing. Every now and then you kind of stop and look behind you because you're in the middle of it. It's gorgeous around. Every now and then you do just have to stop and look around you. But it's great when you look down. You're looking down like 20 feet below and you can barely see the person down there because they're just straight over the hill. You're straight down the hill. You're looking for the little ants kind of coming down here. And it's fun stuff. And then I go, of course, I get to the top. My parents had actually come to watch the race. They took the gondola up the hill. And apparently, by the time I got up to the top of this hill, the gondola had just started. So they had just gotten up like 5-10 minutes before I got here. So it just worked out serendipitously that they'd found me at the top of this climb. And there was like a little kind of cheering crowd up here, which is great. I love it. I love seeing those little cheering crowds. It's so fun. So then we start kind of coming back down the hill again. Everything is kind of going good until probably around here-ish. Let's go this decline and kind of flat area, not so bad. Or that little flat area up to there is not bad. And then from here until really the rest of the race, that was the race. This downhill was the beginning of the area where your legs then never got rest the entirety of the rest of the course. It was like one of those 40 whatever degree ski slope downhills, followed immediately by the ultra loop down here. So the bottom of that wound up being the start of the ultra loop. And to put that one in perspective, I believe the steepest incline of the day they said was like 51 degrees or whatnot. Found it. One thing I love about the ultra loops or the ultra courses is if they plan them correctly, the ultra loop will give you something that nobody else on the course will experience. I did Ohio. It was a dead flat course way back in the day. So what they did is they gave an obstacle you've never seen anywhere else. It was like a telephone pole carry. It was great. Never seen it before, never seen it after. It was like, I went to Vernon one time. They had us run through Action Park, like the empty, like abandoned concourses of Action Park that was down there. That was fantastic. So come over here, and the one thing they gave us that nobody else did was they gave us this loop, and this was, I feel bad. Anybody says they completed the beast and they just did the hardest course in the country, you missed the hardest part of the hardest course in the country, by far. This thing, it was straight up and down every single point of the way. You can see there are no flat parts on this. You are either going straight up the hill, straight down, straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down. There was no place to rest. It had the steepest portions on the course. According to Strava, I believe it was this final kind of incline here was roughly 0.3 miles. And in that 0.3 miles, we went up about 500 feet of elevation gain, which, again, the death march itself was about 1,000 feet per mile. So this section here was about 1,500 feet per mile on average. So that's, or maybe just under that. I think officially is the number, but for rounding purposes. So yeah, this part, again, that was 4 miles straight after that half mile downhill that we never got a rest. We came through, did the kind of wondering where all the obstacles were. They had Bender, then there was nothing else for like 3 miles. Got down to the bottom, did the sandbag carry, which again, it was one of those unisex sandbags, so it was like a 40-pound thing. So for me, that one wasn't too bad, never had to put it down. It was maybe like a half mile long. It was a long sandbag carry. And then they stuck the memory test in the middle, which I'm face palming on that one so bad. They stuck the memory test on that. I haven't seen the memory test since my very first race ever, back in 2018. And I didn't have to do it that time, because I signed up, I did a Beast at Vernon was my very first race. And I did the competitive category. So like, oh yeah, I can do this, whatever. I've been competing in other stuff for years. And at that point, they had said it was only for the opens. We got to it, and like, oh, you're competitive? Just walk by. So got to this, and I was like, what the heck is this? Well, I got my Yankee 8168964. I've remembered my stuff. It's now in long-term memory. That's cool. I didn't fail it. But wasn't expecting that one. Anyway, let's get back in here. All right, we're circling stuff again. We got back out onto the Beast course pretty much almost immediately after that. So we put the sandbag down. We had the plate drag, which was you stuck the sandbag you'd been carrying around for the half mile on the plate and then dragged that. And then you ended the sandbag. So it was like the sandbag became your buddy for a half hour, for a half mile. You just kind of walked around and just did stuff with it. It was great. So then we got back onto the Beast course, and then we hit this giant thing, which frankly, in my mind on the Beast course, maybe this was because I just came off the Ultra Loop, but in my mind, this was the hardest climb of the day. at least on the Beast course. Like I said, everyone talked about Death March. This was the hardest climb, if anything. This was Palmerton plus. The Palmerton second climb plus. I'll be honest, I don't usually think Palmerton's first climb is that bad. In my mind, the second climb is the worst climb of the day on that one. And so everything kind of compares to that. This one had the same terrain. It was in the woods. You're going up over rocks. You're going up over. Might as well do this. You're going up like over the rocks. You're like a foot high. You're going over stumps. You're going over like logs and stuff. You're grabbing onto trees to kind of pull yourself. You are doing a little bit of the bear crawling like you were on the. Not as much, but you're doing a little bit of that to kind of get up that first initial rocky portion of the course of that hill. And then once you get out of the woods, you're like, oh, all right, finally got through this hill. No, you're like maybe 40% done. After you got through that first climbing section in the woods, then you got back onto another ski slope and went up like another 600 feet. That was another one. It was literally 1,000-foot climb in the span of a mile. So it was the same as Palmerton's. It's kind of the same. It had the same numbers kind of as the earlier ones, but just that climbing aspect, the fact that you can't do the textbook kind of shorter strides going up, it forces you to do longer strides. It forces you to kind of move away from the glutes and use more of like your quads and the hamstrings and those. It kind of forces you into the quote unquote incorrect muscle group to use for these idealized climbing situations. It made that one that much harder. And plus, they just had 4.5 miles straight of leg work with no break. And now we just had another mile up. So now we're at 5.5 miles where the legs had no break. And you think, oh, you're going to go back downhill towards the end. I'm now pointing at the map. Come on, cursor. Yep, okay. So we came up, and now you get to like the top of the hill, and you're like, okay, now we have this final kind of descent coming down the hill. It's going to be great. That was the worst descent of the day. I know we saw the girl who was injured early on, and that was the wake-up call. This was a terrible descent. It's one of those where you stick down and you're trying to go forwards down the hill, and like your ankles are. You're going forward down the hills. Your ankles are they're just heading into like the tongue of your shoe. So then you kind of go sideways a little bit, and you kind of go the other sideways a little bit. All the junk that got in your shoes from the water, the stupid water stuff they stuck earlier in the day, they're now rubbing against the bottom of your feet. You're like, do I have blisters down here? Do I have stuff happening? Because it's all. And plus, if you're going that much steeper, you're now putting that much more pressure on your legs, which each step you take. And you might be sliding down a little bit. If you slide down, say 5 feet, and then put a foot down, you're putting even more pressure on there. So by the time I got to the bottom of that hill, like I said, my ankles were feeling shot. My left knee was feeling something in the top, or at least kind of starting to. And that's really kind of where I was getting my doubts on whether a second loop was going to be possible or not. I still had time. It was like 1 o'clock by the time I got down there, maybe just a little after, maybe quarter after 1, something by the time I got down. You're like, okay, just one more obstacle to go, and we're at transition. And then that's where we got to this monster of our half pipe 60-pound sandbag carry, which was literally the entire length of that half pipe going the hill, which it looked really small the day before. It didn't look like that much the day before, but it grew over. I don't know what happened. It grew between Friday and Saturday. We got there, and I believe when I popped it on Strava, it was either at or just short of like 0.4 miles. So it's like a 300-yard up the thing, and then another 300 yards back down. It was a long sandbag carry. It was after 17.5 miles, and yeah, by then like the legs were shaking a little bit. I had to put that thing down like 5 times on the way up. My parents are watching me put this stuff down like 5 times on the way up. It's great. Nothing I could do about it. It just was. So then at that point, got the transition. I gave my memory test thing, passed that. It didn't have to do the weighted chain squats thing that a lot of people were failing that memory test thing. Kind of felt really bad. That's a rough way to enter transition. Yeah, do that sandbag carry, then go and do this. And then at that point, it was in my mind, it's like, do I want to go? I wouldn't have had an issue getting to the next checkpoint because the next checkpoint was just going over that first hill, and that first like 3 to 4 mile kind of hill really wasn't bad. There, like I said, there were a couple spots, but I wouldn't have had an issue getting up and down that. But I don't think it was worth trying to blow my knees over on this thing. That could destroy work. Again, I'm in a field that's historically not good on that. So I think I'm just going to take this and lessons from this, and I can apply them somewhere else. Maybe if I can find a way to like make my joints more kind of bulletproof on these, I may come back and try this again. I don't know. My goal was this was going to be my swan song for Spartan. I was going to move off. But I'll be honest, it's now the next day, and my main muscle group that's sore is actually my glutes. My quads and hamstrings are a little bit. The upper body, not so much, because again, I only did one lap worth of upper body stuff. So the upper body, outside of a knot that I've had in the back of my shoulder blades ever since Tuesday, because apparently I slept on it wrong this week, which was super unfortunate timing. Other than that, the upper body is not feeling too bad. But the glutes took most of it, which means I was actually hiking correctly this time. I was using the right muscle group, where usually, if I do like say a Vernon or a Palmerton, it's always been my quads that get fried. So after doing this, I'm kind of thinking maybe if I can apply what I did here to Vernon again, I might actually be able to get a pretty decent time on that one. If I can just use the glutes for the climbs, I can then use the quads and hamstrings for the running portions between, and I could actually maybe get a decent time on that. So now I'm not sure this is a swan song for Spartan. I may be really dumb and sign up for another one again. We'll find out come November. Usually I sign up like during the Black Friday sales or whatnot. I do this every year, so I hem and haw. Usually after I do one of these, I'm like, that's it, I'm done. And 2 months later, it's like, let's do it again. So we'll see where I'm going to go with this, but this may not be the last one. It's my last one for a couple months. I'm going to take some time off and just kind of R&R, get back onto my usual kind of programming thing on the YouTube stuff and try to keep those things going. But this may not be my last actual race. I might be back for more. We'll see. But overall, I think the course was really fair. I know it gets talked up a lot, and I've learned there's some areas that get talked up that are worth being talked up. There's some, like the Death March, that I think get talked up a lot that didn't quite live up to the expectation. But maybe that's because I went into it with a non-racing kind of mindset and more of just, I'm going to treat this with the respect. I'm going to treat it more like a hike. So maybe I went into it with a different mentality. But yeah, no, on a technical level, this is definitely the hardest course they offer. I think I just had an issue. It might just be I'm getting older. I'm 42 right now. It might just be joints and stuff may just have issues on this particular type of course. But yes, I think it is a very fair kind of course. If you know what you're doing, if you know how to hike, it's very fair until you really get to that beast, the ultra loop, and then that's going to be where everything gets tested. It, as a beast type course, I think this is fantastic. I would say if you want to try something, I would 100% go for this. It is a fantastic venue to go for that. But just be warned on those downhills. Take them with care. Take care of your joints and stuff during it. Try to keep your strides as short as possible, which is it's easier said than done on some of those descents. But yeah, if I were like 10 years younger, I'd be like, heck yes, I want to retry this. But if I want to do it again, I would have to learn a couple safety things first. Like I would have to find out how to safeguard the joints first. But no, it was a great time. It was a fantastic weekend to have it. It was like mid 40s when we first started standing on the starting line. It got by around like 9-10 o'clock, the sun started kind of peeking out. It maybe got to like the 70s for about 10-15 minutes. And then a cloud cover came over the rest of the time I was out there. So it wound up staying like probably low 60s most of the race at least most of the race that I was there for. I think the sun started coming out a little afterwards, but no, it couldn't beat the weather. It was dry all week. It was dry conditions. It was the perfect conditions to do this on. And that said, even with perfect conditions, it was still based on the numbers I was given from my brothers who were watching the event or trying to track it online. I think it was just over 400 people started the day, and I think it was either right at or just under 200 people finished. So I figured even under the most ideal of conditions, roughly half the people, or just over half the people who started, still dropped out for various reasons. Whether it be injury, whether it be not making the cutoffs, whether it be prevention, whether it be just being tired, whatever it is. So I mean, it is still a beast of a course, but it is one of those that everyone says, is it worth doing? Yes. No, I think this is worth as a bucket list kind of race to give it a shot. It's definitely a fun time. It will test you, but it is a fun time. But I'm now rambling. I'm saying the same things over and over and over. So I think from there we're going to, where's my cursor? All right. So I think from there I'm just going to sign off on this one. And who knows, maybe I'll be back down in the future in future races coming up. We'll see. I'm going to take some time off on racing for a little bit. I need some downtime. I'm a very seasonal guy. I don't do all year. I do I'll do like a 5 month stretch, take 2 months off. 5 month stretch, like 2 months off. So I need my couple months off. And then I'll be back probably sometime in November. We'll start planning out the next things coming up. But nah, fun time, great weekend, highly recommend. And we'll see where the future takes us from here. So until that future time comes, or until we figure things out, I will sign off. And this has been my Killington Ultra Review. Enjoy!